I have a gun?
Absolutely not.
Okay, Jesus, fine. I'll throw a fucking sandwich at them.
How's it going there, guys? So I wanted to talk about season 1 of The Last of Us HBO. So obviously, just going off the name of my channel, TLOU James, you know, I'm a huge Last of Us fan. I still have the original Last of Us from the PlayStation 3. I got it on day one back in 2013, and I have, you know, every physical version of each game that has come out thus far. And as like a Last of Us super fan, I feel obligated to discuss what I thought about the show. And you know, I haven't really seen too many video game adaptations before. I saw the Uncharted film last year, which I thought was okay. I didn't think it was great, but I didn't think it was bad. And other than that, I really don't have much of a history with video game adaptations because they've always kind of gotten a bad rap, and people have always said, oh, video game adaptations are bad. And I'm filming this on April 1st. I believe the Super Mario movie, it either just came out yesterday or it's about to come out. So it seems like video game adaptations are becoming a bigger deal now, and there's more of them, and it does seem like the quality is improving on these video game adaptations. I know people were high on Castlevania. They were high on the Witcher series. And I think there was a Cyberpunk series that came out that people were pretty high on. But yeah, I don't really have much of a history watching video games adapted to other mediums. But, you know, The Last of Us, I think of any video game series, it was most likely to be a good adaptation just because it's so cinematic. It's such a cinematic game, and it's such a well-realized story. And going into the HBO show, you know, I was excited. I was. And having Neil Druckmann from Naughty Dog involved in it, and Craig Mazin, who got high praise for what he did with Chernobyl. It seemed like they had the right people involved in the creation of this show. And, you know, I knew a little bit of Pedro Pascal from Narcos, and so I knew he was like a very popular actor, and people thought he was a great actor, a great choice for Joel. And as far as Bella Ramsay as Ellie, you know, I had never watched Game of Thrones. I had no history of watching her on anything else, so I didn't know really what to expect coming into the season. But my point is, I was optimistic that this would be a great adaptation going into it, and overall, I think it delivered. And I would say it's the best video game adaptation that I've seen. But again, I don't have much of a history with video game adaptations. And you know, the excitement for this adaptation didn't really hit me until the day of the first episode. And of course, I did a reaction on this channel to the first episode, and I also did one for the second episode. But I didn't do that for the whole season. I thought initially I would, but I kind of just preferred to watch it by myself and soak it in, not have to worry about, you know, filming a reaction to it. So with this video, I just want to give my overall thoughts on the season, and I don't want to have to go super in depth about it, but I want to just give the things I talk about, the things I liked, maybe some things that could have been better. And yeah, I just want to give some of my thoughts. And I know some people were going each week, they would review each episode, and I'm like, I thought about doing that, but I just like, that's a lot. But overall, I would say for season 1 of The Last of Us HBO, I really enjoyed it. I thought the acting, let's start with that, was phenomenal. Bella Ramsay and Pedro Pascal as Joel and Ellie, I thought delivered on the two most important roles. And this adaptation wouldn't have worked if those characters if they didn't have the right chemistry, if they didn't portray them in the right way. But I thought they were great. And I want to say I thought Bella Ramsey, I was even more impressed by Bella Ramsey. Not to say I wasn't impressed by Pedro Pascal. I thought he did a very great job as Joel. But I feel like Ellie's character is a harder, more difficult character to portray. And I think Bella Ramsey, she had just like the right attitude and personality with her take of Ellie. And some of the scenes she acted in, I felt like she added something to certain scenes that were in the game. Just like, for instance, and of course, there's gonna be spoilers for the show and the game, so obviously you've been warned. But like the Henry and Sam death, like her reaction to that was just like, I was blown away just by her reaction to it. It kind of added like an extra emotional layer to it, and I felt like that scene was better in the show, partly because of Bella's acting in that scene. Yeah, so Bella Ramsey did impress me, and I would say really from episode 1, I was sold on her as Ellie, and it seemed like on the internet, it was kind of, she was kind of a, I don't want to say controversial, but maybe divisive pick. Oh, I guess you could say controversial as well, but some people weren't for Bella Ramsey's casting, and just didn't want to give her a chance as Ellie. And like, I gotta say, I did get kind of annoyed by the amount of people saying or picking the casting before the casting was announced. It just got kind of old after a while. Surfing Twitter, it's like, oh, Joel should be this, Ellie should be this. It's like, let's just wait and see who they pick, relax, and let's wait for the show to happen and see how they do it. And I think it's important to remain open-minded. And I think a lot of people were closed-minded, like, oh, the person who plays Ellie needs to look exactly like Ellie. And people obviously are bringing up that Bella Ramsey doesn't look exactly like Ellie, which I don't really care, honestly. Like, I mean, I don't know. She's around the age of Ellie. She's got brown hair. I mean, that doesn't matter to me. What matters is, does she have the right personality? That what's the word I'm trying to think of? Maybe not nuance, but I can't think of the word, but maybe like nuance and personality, attitude, just like the little quirks of Ellie. And I felt like she accurately portrayed that character from the game. And her portrayal of Ellie's a little bit different than Ashley Johnson and what she did in the game. But my point is, I believed Bella Ramsey as Ellie, and I believed Pedro Pascal as Joel. And Pedro Pascal, I think the difference between Joel from the show and Joel in the game is it's not drastically different. And I would say that what I would say is slightly different is Joel in the game, I would say, is like more stoic. It doesn't really show emotion that often. Whereas Joel in the show, I felt like they kind of went deeper into his emotional side and what he went through after Sarah's death and how it impacted him. And the season finale, they talked about how he tried to commit suicide, and in the game they never say that he tried to do that. It was kind of hinted at one point in the game, kind of, when Joel and Ellie, I'm talking about the game, are in the hotel and they see a dead body, someone who committed suicide, and Ellie said, oh, they took the easy way out, and Joel is like, oh, trust me, it's not easy. So that might have been him hinting at he's tried it before, that he has a history with trying to commit suicide, which I think that that layer did add extra emotional weight to what had happened to his daughter, his, original daughter, Sarah. So yeah, Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, they get a thumbs up from me. I think they did a great job. People always say, oh, there could have been better cast and better this, better that. I mean, the fact of the matter is we'll never know. I mean, if you weren't crazy about Pedro or Bella, whatever, I thought they did a great job. I think they accurately portrayed those characters and brought a slightly different spin to them, but they still felt very familiar to the people that have played the games. And what I also thought was great was the cinematography. I thought it just, I don't know what type of cameras they were using, but it was just beautiful shots, and just especially I really liked the episodes where they really showed more of the countryside of this post-apocalyptic America. I think of episode 4 when they're driving across the country and they're just showing different parts, the scenery in that world. And I think of episode 6 when they're in Wyoming and it's all the mountains and the snow and the all the stars in the sky. You can see what do you call it, the colorful, what do you call it, but the sky just you can see all the stars, and just it was beautiful, the shots, some of the shots. And yeah, I really was impressed by the cinematography. And I also, the set designs and the music I thought were also great. I mean, the music is the same music they used from The Last of Us 1 and 2 and even Left Behind. And I liked how they even decided to blend in Last of Us 2 music into Season 1 here, which of course covers Game 1, Last of Us Part 1. So I liked how they blended that in. And of course, you gotta choose the Last of Us music for the show. I mean, that music is so iconic in the game. It's so great in the game. And the Last of Us music is my favorite video game music, or it's definitely up there. It's one of the few, Last of Us 1 and 2 are probably one of the few video game series that I have the whole soundtrack on my Spotify. So it was, nice to just hear certain music that you've listened to for so long in the show, and music that's, being heard by new people who haven't played the games and maybe are just watching the show. So yeah, I mean, everything I would say that you would want out of a great TV show, I would say they nailed. And you can tell that this show was a pretty big budget. It was reported that each episode was over 10 million per episode, which I could definitely believe it. And yeah, I'll be curious to see, because this show is very popular right now. Season 1, I think it had more views than House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones spin-off series. I think that's what it was. But that each episode, it grew in popularity as the season went along here. So episode 1 had 4.7 million views for the premiere. Then episode 2 had 5.7 million, 6.4 for 3, 7.5 for 4, 11.6, which includes, it's Friday through Sunday because of the Super Bowl in that week. 7.8 million for episode 6, 7.7 million for episode 7, 8.1 million for episode 8, and then the finale, 8.2 million. So for the premieres of each episode, it gathered more viewers. And like I said, episode 5, it actually debuted on Friday, and they considered the premiere Friday through Sunday, so we get a little bit more time. So those numbers are a little bit maybe inflated. But yeah, it had great views, and it was, excuse me, it was kind of funny just to see Last of Us is almost like more mainstream than it ever has been during the show. I mean, you have Pedro Pascal on Saturday Night Live, who they're doing this Last of Us skit on Saturday Night Live, and it is such a weird thing for me to see, like The Last of Us being so mainstream now. And I mean, I was there from day one when the first game came out, over almost 10 years ago at this point. So it's like, you know, this series is, I hold it near and dear, and it's like, it's just very weird now to see it mainstream, which that could be a blessing and a curse. Let's see how this goes, but I think season 2 will be great too. I'm sure it will be, and I'm sure it's gonna have a bigger budget, but we'll talk about season 2 at a later time. But yeah, The Last of Us HBO season 1 was obviously a hit, and it seems like it's gonna be another big hit for HBO, and who knows, maybe it could be the next Game of Thrones for HBO. I mean, I kind of doubt that because Game of Thrones is huge, but and I haven't seen Game of Thrones, but it's gonna, I think it's definitely gonna be a huge show, and it can be one of the most talked about TV shows over the next few years here. And what would I say were my favorite episodes? Now, I liked all the episodes. There wasn't one episode that I thought was bad or even okay. I thought the episodes were good to very good to great, you know. But I may be in the minority here, but if I had to pick 3, what my 3 favorite episodes would be, I would say episode 2, 4, and 6. And I know people kind of criticize episode 4 for being so short, but I really liked how much that episode focused on Joel and Ellie, and just focused on that relationship, that growing relationship, and how they went into Kansas City, and just I really liked the jokes that Ellie had in that episode. I liked the more quiet moments, and that also, for the first time, we see Ellie have to kill someone, or have to shoot someone. She actually didn't kill them, but you had this person in Kansas City when they got there, which, you know, in the game it's actually Pittsburgh, but for the show they made it Kansas City. You see them begging for their life, which reminded me a lot of Last of Us 2, especially because you see a lot of that in the gameplay of Last of Us 2. And some of the just like the emotional scenes in that game or in that episode, I really felt it, and I really enjoyed the bonding in that episode, and the jokes, and even though it was short, I really enjoyed it. It was a short but sweet episode, and episode 2 I thought was great too, and a few of the episodes had cold openings where they would expand upon the lore of how this outbreak happened with the whole cordyceps fungus infection, and they're showing this professor, and I'm trying to remember what country it was. I can't remember what country it was. I think it was some country in Asia. I drawing a blank on that one right now, but that was a pretty interesting cold opening, and how they brought her in, and when they asked her, what do we do with this cordyceps breaking out here? And she just said, you know, we gotta bomb the city. And it's just like, that was a very interesting but kind of crazy cold open in there. And episode 2, I also liked the clicker scene in the museum, and that was actually probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole show, was that clicker scene in the museum. And just, they really did, I felt like they matched the intensity of how it felt when you run into clickers in the game. My only problem with episode 2 was, or maybe not problem, but what I thought was a little weird was Tess' death. I thought in the show, they have these things called tendrils of the infected, where like they come out of their mouth, and they didn't have that in the show. There's no spores in the show. It's a little bit different how the cordyceps spreads in the show to the game, but you have Tess' death. She's about to die, and this infected, I think it was a runner, came up to Tess, and it's like, it looked like the runner was just like making out with Tess right before she lit her the flames to explode the building, and that was her death scene. But I just thought that was a little strange, but it didn't really ruin it for me. But it was just, I just thought that was probably the weirdest scene in the whole show. Yeah, so I thought they could have done without the making out with a runner. That was a little weird. But yeah, no, episode 2 was one of my favorites. And episode 6, I really liked episode 6. Again, for the cinematography, just seeing the countryside of Wyoming. And episode 6 also had maybe my favorite scene in the whole show, where Joel is in Jackson with Tommy. And he really showed an emotional side to him that you haven't seen before with Joel, and how basically he felt like he was getting attached to Ellie and that she was becoming a second daughter. And he was scared of losing her and messing up somehow. You know, there's another new thing about Joel in the show to the game, is that he's deaf in one of his ears. I can't remember if it was left or right. I think it was his left ear, but I may be wrong about that. And he was deaf because later we find out because he tried to commit suicide, and I guess when he shot it was right near his ear, so I guess it made him deaf or something. But yeah, he's just basically, he was showing a very like vulnerable side to him, and how he's just saying, I'm weak. Joel in the game is 50 something, early 50s, and I think Joel in the show is early 50s. So for the world of The Last of Us, that's pretty old. I'm sure the life expectancy in the world of The Last of Us is a lot lower than the world that we live in right now. So Joel was he was getting very emotional because he didn't want to lose another daughter, and he didn't want to screw up again. And I think he felt guilty, and he felt like he kind of screwed up with Sarah, which I don't think he did. I mean, obviously I don't believe that, but I can understand why he feels so much guilt, and also, well, sadness, obviously, for the death of his daughter. And that, I'm just thinking about that scene, I'm getting choked up. It was just a very powerful emotional monologue, and how you can see how he's really starting to care for Ellie, and it's like his second daughter that he doesn't want to lose. He doesn't want to lose another daughter because he knows how dangerous their trek to the Fireflies can be. But that was probably, honestly, that his acting in that scene was phenomenal, and I was getting choked up just watching it. So that was probably definitely one of my favorite scenes. I don't know if it's the favorite scene. I have a lot of favorite scenes from the show. Yeah, so some other favorite scenes, like I talked about Joel's monologue, the clickers in the museum. What I liked is the season finale, they showed Anna, who, for those of you who don't know, is Ellie's mom. And they showed the birth of Ellie, and they kind of, or not kind of, but they showed why Ellie is immune. She was born right at the moment that Anna was bitten, and they show her cut the umbilical cord, and unfortunately Anna, I mean, not surprisingly, they had to kill her, and that Anna's no longer alive. I mean, I don't think they ever confirmed that Anna was dead before. I may be wrong about that, but we always kind of just assumed that. But that was an added part of Ellie's story that we haven't seen before, and that was really cool to see. And I'm glad I want to see more stuff like that in season 2, where they really expand the lore, the stories of Joel and Ellie, or whoever characters in this world, and whatever it may be. And another favorite scene, I mean, I gotta talk about, obviously, one of the most important scenes in the whole season 1 is Joel's rampage in the hospital. Now, I thought it was a very powerful scene. I mean, just, for what he was doing, obviously it was what he was doing, some people may have a problem with, or didn't think he made the right decision, and that's a scene that people within Last of Us community have been arguing about for years, or was that the morally right decision? It's kind of a morally gray decision, what he did, and I don't really want to get too deep into it because I've talked about it before. But anyway, I thought that scene, they did it justice, and it was a powerful scene, and somewhat disturbing scene too. And I tweeted on the night of the finale after watching, I said, I love that The Last of Us HBO limited the action for the season to build up to Joel's rampage to save Ellie in the finale. It makes the scene more shocking and powerful. Action needs to be constantly happen in games. But with TV, they can get away with limited the action more. So I think that the action was limited in over the course of season 1. They could have had more action than they ultimately ended up having, and I think that, but I do think that did make that scene even more powerful and shocking, as I said. But in hindsight, I don't think the fact that they limited action made the overall season better. I think the overall season would have been better if they had more action, and I felt like the action was a little bit too cut back, or there wasn't enough action scenes, and that's been a lot of people's gripes with season 1, that there wasn't enough infected, there wasn't enough action against humans, or just action in general. It was a lot of a lot of conversations and a lot of world building, which is cool, which is great. I want that. But I felt like they could have had, and a few weeks ago I didn't feel this way, but the longer I get away from the show, the more I kind of do agree that maybe the episodes could have been a little bit longer, and maybe they could have had more action scenes. It just, you want the world to feel more like a threat to try to live in, and well, I do think it was, but it definitely was kind of jarring at times how little action there was, especially coming from the game. And I don't think there needs to be as much action in the show as the game, obviously, just because with a game you need to have constant action, because it's it's a interactive experience where you need to have constant things going on. I'm not, so what I'm saying is they could have had a few more action scenes than they ultimately did. I just felt like it was really restricted. I thought all the action scenes that they had were great. I thought they were powerful, and I thought they were just really well done. And each scene with infected, or fighting the hunters, or human action, I thought it had great cinematography. It had great tension and acting and all that. But I felt like we didn't get enough of that. I felt like they could have done more. And Neil Druckmann has already said that they plan to have more infected for season 2, which of course it's going to begin to cover The Last of Us Part 2. So, I mean, part of me, I don't know. Part of me was a little bit, I don't want to say sympathetic, but I'm sure it is very time consuming, and it probably costs a lot of money to put together these action scenes, especially the one with the infected. Because, a lot of these infecteds are wearing costumes, like very, they have costume designers that probably, just to make infected look realistic, had to put in a lot of time and effort. So I can sort of understand that, but at the same time, the world in the TV show definitely feels a lot more hollow than the world in the game. And I don't know if you guys listen to Last Stand Media. They do Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, and they have an Xbox podcast as well. But each week they were reviewing each episode, and Colin Moriarty, who's the founder of Last Stand Media, he's a big Last of Us fan. He loves The Last of Us 1 and 2 as well. But he was saying that The Last of Us in the show feels like more like The Road, the novel, The Road, which I've never read, but I've heard a lot of people compare The Last of Us to The Road, and that it's, basically just a lot of people have died and there's no one left, and the infected have died, or, well, in The Last of Us TV show, I guess maybe you could assume that just a lot of the affected have died off, and that's why you don't see a lot. But I don't know. For me, I definitely would have liked to seen more action. And I didn't feel that way initially when the show ended. I was kind of okay with it. And it didn't need, like I said, it doesn't need to be the game. It doesn't need to have, 30 minutes of action scenes nonstop like it's John Wick, or hell, even it doesn't even need to be The Walking Dead, which people want to compare it to. I think The Last of Us is different than The Walking Dead. And, well, I frankly think season 1 of The Last of Us alone is better than any season of The Walking Dead. I mean, I like The Walking Dead, but definitely not on the level of The Last of Us for me. And whereas The Walking Dead, I feel like is there's a lot of zombie action in it, and there are it does focus a lot of time on the humans in that world. But I feel like The Walking Dead, we've seen an action zombie show. So I feel like if The Last of Us tried to have constant action against the infected, it would just, maybe in some ways they don't want to have it feel too much like The Walking Dead, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, I think you do need to have more action in The Last of Us, but not to the level of The Last of Us game, and not to the level of The Walking Dead show. It was just too restricted, or they didn't have enough action scenes, and that's probably maybe my only gripe from season 1. And overall I think it is a great first season, and I think it's the best video game adaptation that I've seen. Last of Us season 1 on HBO, I thought was great. I think it respected the games. I think the attention to detail and how they tried to mimic the games, just like the small things, like maybe notes that they run into, or signs, or whatever. It definitely felt like they just looked at the games, and of course you have Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog and Sony involved with this, so they really could get a microscope and just have like all the little details from the game integrated into the show. And I think the actors were great, not just Bella Ramsay and Pedro Pascal, but all the supporting actors. And of course, I probably should mention or talk about a little bit about probably the most discussed episode, and probably the most popular episode, in episode 3, the Bill and Frank episode. And I thought it was great. I thought it was a well done, and one of the more emotional episodes, a well done love story. For me, I don't want to say I felt like I was watching a different show, but for me, I felt like you were taking all this time away from Joel and Ellie, which is the most important part of The Last of Us, or definitely Last of Us 1. I'm not sure. I'm kind of torn about this. Like, I feel like they could have maybe had this episode after the season, and maybe showed, like, it could have been like a special, like, oh, here's the story of Bill and Frank, and maybe they could have done episode 3 a little bit differently, and had just Joel and Ellie go into Bill's house, but maybe it wouldn't hit as hard as it ultimately did when Ellie reads that note, that's suicide note from Bill. So I'm kind of torn about episode 3. I think this season could have had maybe like 2 or 3 more episodes, and maybe episode 3 wouldn't have felt like it wouldn't have taken too much away. That's what I felt like after watching all 9 episodes, that episode 3 really took a lot of screen time away from expanding upon the Joel and Ellie story, and showing more bonding and relationship moments, and hell, maybe even just showing more action too. But this episode would have worked better if they had more episodes. So maybe it's not so much an episode 3 problem, whereas it's more of just they should have had more episodes problem. Now that I think about it on a deeper level, but I thought episode 3 was really well done and was really well told and acted and portrayed. And I would say like the iconic moments that are from the game that they have in the show, I thought they all were great in their own ways, but I don't think they hit as much as the game just because those moments are so ingrained in me, and just every little detail of those moments is so ingrained in me, where maybe it's hard for my brain to adjust to seeing this iconic scene reacted or reenacted in a different way. I think I need to find a way to appreciate the certain iconic moments from the show and separate that from the game. But I thought they were great. For me, the iconic moments from the game will always top the iconic moments that they have integrated into the TV show. So, like the talk between Joel and Ellie in the farmhouse, I thought it was good. I thought it hit more in the game, and even Ellie's asking or trying to see if Joel lied at the end, and she said okay. I thought that was good, but again, I thought it was better in the game. But not for every iconic moment. Like I said before, I thought the Sam and Henry death scene was more powerful and emotional for me than the game. But I mean, the game one still hits. So, and episode 1, I should probably talk about how just bonkers the opening to episode 1 was, and the outbreak. That was really cool seeing getting more screen time with Sarah and seeing a little bit more of her world, her existence, and the subtle differences of how the outbreak came to be, and the craziness of, in the first episode you see all these planes going down, and you don't get that in the game. And when they're Joel, Tommy, Sarah all on the run, there's a plane that crashes, and that's ultimately what stops them from venturing out of Texas. And they definitely got the intensity down, because that's such a crazy intense opening in the game, and it's so iconic. And I feel like they definitely did that those moments well. And well, Sarah's death was emotional, just like the game too, and obviously heartbreaking, just like the game. Yeah, so I think they respected the Last of Us video game series very well. I'm quite pleased with this. I'm looking forward to season 2 coming out here. Who knows when? I mean, Bella Ramsay has said they're probably the earliest they're going to start filming is late this year into early next year. So I probably wouldn't expect Last of Us season 2 to come out until maybe the earliest end of 2024, but I'm going to say it's probably going to be more like 2025, but that's okay. They can take their time, and I expect season 2 to have even a bigger budget and hopefully more episodes. I'm hoping Neil Druckmann has already came out and said that they want to make Last of Us 2, which obviously they're going to cover next, into 2 seasons. And I'm going to talk about Last of Us 2 spoilers here. I'm very curious to see how they're going to handle Joel's death in this, because it's like, you have a big time actor in Pedro Pascal, and of course if you played The Last of Us 2, which I'm spoiling right now, I hope you have played, he dies early in the game. So are they going to kill Pedro Pascal like early in season 2? Because I'm sure it enters their mind, like, we're going to kill off one of the biggest actors in the world right now. That could really affect the viewership, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that watch The Last of Us just for Pedro Pascal. I mean, for me, I don't mind if they tweak the story a little bit, and maybe they're going to have to kill off Joel. The people saying, oh, they shouldn't kill off Joel. If they're covering The Last of Us Part 2, they have to kill off Joel. And I love Joel. And I've talked about Joel's death before. I've talked about The Last of Us Part 2 before. And I love The Last of Us Part 2. But it's not going to be The Last of Us Part 2 if you don't kill off Joel. if you're saying you're adapting The Last of Us Part 2, you have to kill off Joel. And I love Joel's character. But I'm opening up the can of worms of The Last of Us Part 2 here. But the death of Joel, I wasn't surprised by. I thought would happen. I thought his character arc, he had reached his full character arc. I didn't think there was too many other stories to tell with Joel's death. And I don't want to make this a Last of Us Part 2 video. I'm going to have plenty of more videos talking about The Last of Us Part 2 on a deeper level. But I think that's really... that's going to be tough. A tough decision. But obviously, because they kill off Pedro Pascal doesn't mean he still can't be on the show. In the game, you have Ellie's flashbacks with Joel, so you can include them in those scenes. And maybe they could even show even more flashbacks than they did in the game. And maybe they could even show flashbacks of Joel before he met Ellie. And the 20-year gap, which a lot of Last of Us fans want to be explored more, between the outbreak and meeting Ellie. So, I mean, I'll be curious to see what they do, and I'll be curious to see who they cast for Abby. Such a divisive character, but a character over time that I've grown to understand, and I think she's really well portrayed and acted in the game by Laura Bailey. And it's definitely a complicated relationship with Abby for what she did to Joel, but I understand what they were trying to do with Abby in The Last of Us 2. And I don't want to talk about too deep about it, just because I'll have plenty of other videos talking about it. But yeah, so that will be Last of Us Part 2. It's a very beloved game, but it's also a lot of people hate it too. You know, it's one of those very controversial games that people either seem to love it or hate it. And it really just comes down to the story. But that'll be interesting to see. And like I said, I don't expect to see season 2 for a little while now. But yeah, so overall, Last of Us HBO season 1, I thought was great. And I plan to buy the 4K Blu-ray when it comes out in the coming months. Probably do an unboxing video of that. And probably be some like cool behind the scenes stuff in that. But yeah, let me know what did you think of Last of Us HBO season 1? Do you think it's as good as the game? Do you think it's better than the game, maybe? Or maybe you thought it was very good, but not quite as good as the game? And what are your expectations and predictions for how they're going to handle The Last of Us Part 2? Leave a comment, let me know. But yeah, so I don't think I have much else to say regarding The Last of Us HBO, but I thought it was a really good season, a really good adaptation, and it's a big show for HBO now, and it's exciting. So yeah, I have nothing else to say, so I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.